electricity pricing, billing, and everything in between, including tariffs.
From when we took over in 2013, we have not had a cost-reflective tariff, and that is the truth.
Tariff has already increased. It's not been approved, but somebody is paying for the difference.
Good day and welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots, a podcast hosted by the Next Year Group, where we delve into emerging issues in the global energy markets. Today, we're thrilled to kick off the first episode of What's with the Grid, a series of conversations with women in the power sector. This platform provides women policymakers, managers, and decision makers in the Nigerian energy space an opportunity to discuss critical issues shaping the transformation of our energy sector. This series is brought to you by the Women on the Grid Hub, supported by the UKNIAF program, which is delivered by Tetra Tech and funded by FCDO. Hosting today's podcast is my colleague, Stella Odessa. Stella, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this podcast hosted by the Women on the Grid Hub. The Women on the Grid Hub is a platform for female senior management, people who work in the on-grid electricity space. And this morning, we're here to talk about electricity pricing, billing, and everything in between, including tariffs. And here to unpack all of this are some very important, very hardworking women from the supply and the demand side of the electricity market. Maybe I should start with the customer. I mean, we're all electricity customers, aren't we? But for purposes of this conversation, someone will bring in a very customer-centric perspective. And that's our sister, Tosin Adefeko. Tosin is a corporate executive and entrepreneur with over 25 years multi-sectoral experience in Nigeria. She's a business leader who believes in the power of storytelling as a tool to help us thrive better as humans. She's also the CEO at AT3 Resources and a member of the very famous WIMBIZ, Women in Management, Business and Public Service. You're welcome, Tosin.
Thank you, Stella. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And then sitting right next to me here is Jumoke Delano. Jumoke is a seasoned multi-jurisdictional lawyer. She's qualified to practice in Nigeria, the United Kingdom, and the state of New York. She has over 30 years experience across banking, development finance, infrastructure, and the energy sector. And she was, up until very recently, the head of regulatory and government relations at the Abuja Electric Distribution Company. Hello, Jumoke. Welcome.
Thank you, Stella. It's my pleasure.
Then all the way from Cairo, we have Dr. Dalia Sakir. Dalia is a UNFCCC accredited climate change expert who supports governments and the private sector in the Middle East and Africa to transition towards low-carbon market. She has a PhD degree in cleaner production, cleaner products, industrial ecology and sustainability from the Erasmus University Rotterdam. And for a couple of years, between 2010 and 2016, she led the IFC Resource Efficiency Program covering 19 countries. Hi there, Dalia. Thank you for being here.
Hello, all, and it's a pleasure really to be here with all the lovely ladies.
Thank you. And then last but very definitely not the least, one of my favorite people, Wola Joseph Kondotti. Wola is a highly innovative, results-focused and commercially minded business leader with experience in driving business and operational direction in the energy and finance sector. She also happens to be a lawyer, by the way, a fact which she tends to de-emphasize sometimes. She's the Chief Legal and Company Secretary at the Eco Distribution Company in Lagos. Wola, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Like I said at the beginning, we're all customers, but as we unpick this conversation or the various thematic strands within this conversation, the one who's actually wearing the customer hat today is Tosin. So because the customer is always right, I'd like to start from there. What do you think, Tosin? Increase in tariffs. Will that mean more suffering for Nigerians? What's your take?
Okay, hello again, ladies. Well, like I said earlier, I'm glad to be here to share my perspective. And from the perspective that as a consumer, I like to feel like consumer and a business owner, I like to talk about the pain that I feel when it comes to electricity issues in the first place. So when we talk about increase of tariff, the response to that question is pretty obvious. Now, thinking about the current economy situation that we all find ourselves in, I think what we're all going through now is I don't know what the economists call it. Maybe it's hyperinflation, overinflation. There's an increase in the cost of food. There's an increase in the cost of petrol pump prices. There's, in terms of affordability of the common elements as humans that we need in life, school fees, everything has gone up. So bringing it down to the context of this conversation, which is electricity, obviously, isn't it, so obvious that any further increases is going to exacerbate poverty, is going to exacerbate the pain that Nigerians are currently feeling. So I don't even think, to me, it's not even a question to think what the answer would be. I think the response to that question is very, very clear. Any further increases, any further changes to what we currently have now will change the context that we find ourselves in. And I'm speaking primarily from myself, apart from being a user in the home context, I'm also speaking as a user from a business context. And I don't know where the questions are going to go to
I was
later,
actually going to go there.
Exactly, because I was going to tell you a bit of my trajectory. So from when I was an employee for the last 2 decades as an employee, before I set up my business like 7 years ago, it didn't too matter to me what the electricity tariffs were, right? So you just resume at work, you know what your deliverables were, you make sure you meet them, you get off work, you go home. You focus on whatever tariffs the home context requires, which were not that dire, right? But coming from a business owner perspective, in my first 2 years, I ran my business. It's a consulting business. So I ran my business in the initial period of 2 years from my house. Once again, I couldn't quite feel the pain of the tariffs directly to the business because I was working from home, right? The moment I stepped out to go and rent my own office and then started to see what the billings were doing to the business in terms of direct operational costs, then I started to feel the pain. And I remember being, first and foremost, a postpaid client. And then when the bills will come, and I'll scrutinize them, and I'll be like, there's no way we have a 3-room apartment and we're paying this much for electricity. Then I started to interrogate the tariffs. I started to write letters. And I know someone from ECHO is on this meeting today. They were very helpful, by the way, Bola, so let me just chip that in. Your staff were super helpful. I mean, I don't want to name names, but 2 or 3 people resolved our problems at the time, which was transiting from postpaid to prepaid. Now, what I found with the postpaid for me was it just wasn't the best in terms of determining the use of electricity, because there was a period where there was COVID, right? There was the COVID period. Yeah. And we moved from working in the office to going back to working within our home settings. And guess what happened when we came back? After 3 months, we had this huge bill. We were not in the office. So if pre-COVID, I didn't understand the tariff system and I was complaining, do you imagine what happened post-COVID? When we got back to the office, we knew we weren't there, yet we had those tariffs waiting for us. That's when I knew there was a problem. That's when I started to look for the executive heads of those businesses. I started to write letters, and then we transited from postpaid to prepaid. Now, why I say the prepaid model was better for me and is still better now as a business is the mere fact that at least we know what we're consuming.
Yes, which actually brings me to a really important point, right? Because there are a lot of consumers that don't even know how to engage. So I think it's very instructive that you took note of what was happening beyond maybe just grumbling within the walls of your offices. You took initiative, and I'll come back to you on that. But I just want to get Jumoke's perspective because she's sitting right next to me. Jumoke, we're both lawyers, but today I'm not a lawyer. I'm a consumer. So what do you think? Tariffs, to be or not to be, to increase or not to increase?
Thank you, Tosin, for those thoughts. And we're all customers. In one way or the other, we're customers. Even if we work within the utility, we're still customers at the end of the day. What I wanted to say is I do agree with you on the issue of being a prepaid rather than a postpaid customer, because that allows you to control your usage, control your consumption, and plan. So, I agree with that. But on the issue of the increase in tariff and whether it will have an impact, of course it will. But what I want to say is that the tariff has already increased. It's not been approved, but somebody is paying for the difference. So while you may say that, oh, if the tariff increases, it would mean a lot, impact on the life of Nigerians. True, but I'm telling you that the tariff is not static. It has already changed, but somebody is paying the cost, the difference between what consumers are paying and what the distribution companies are allowed, to charge. What is a cost-reflective tariff and what the discos are charging? So there is no free lunch, as they say. The tariffs have already gone up because there is a mechanism that allows the tariff to adjust. If you look at the recent order that came out, so there was a freezing. The inputs, you run a business. So one of the things you do as a business person is your inputs go to determine what is the cost of your service. Just like a utility company. The inputs, the costs from the GENCO to, from the fuel suppliers to the GENCO to the market operator, the administrative players in the sector, to the distribution company costs. All these things go into the tariff. So for somebody who is self-generating, when you don't have light, for example, you have to buy fuel. The subsidy on fuel has been removed. So you are already paying even on that side. I just wanted to bring in that perspective, so that you really understand that because the consumers are not feeling it today, it's not because the tariff has not gone up. It has gone up. It's just that the government is for now choosing to subsidize. Thank
Really?
you, Stella.
That's an interesting take. Wala, would you? Yeah, I see Tosin shaking her head. I'm coming back to you. I just want to hear Wala's voice on this, though.
Yes,
And I know that Wala is very, she empathizes so much. But today, Wala, you are echo disco. So let's hear from you.
yes. Today I'm eco disco, and that's because I understand. I've been in the industry 11 years, so I really understand what exactly the issues that I read. I empathize with the consumer. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a consumer as well. But the truth is that we need to pick our suffering at this point in time. And Jumoke, she touched on a lot of the things I would have wanted to say, but just to throw more light, do we want to suffer in terms of diesel, or do we want to suffer in terms of paying the cost of power? Today, subsidized rates, eco-disco, average tariff is 59 naira 50 kobo, average. If we were not subsidized, it would be 114 naira. The same analysis using diesel, you'll be spending 180 naira. So the question is, do you want to pay cost-reflective tariff to the discos and allow the discos be able to get better at providing this power to your doorstep? From when we took over in 2013, we have not had a cost-reflective tariff, and that is the truth, which means we've not been able to fund our business. We've not been able, I'm sure Tosin, at 83, where you lead, you're able to look at, the cost of this, to determine the price you want your consumers or your customers to pay. In a co-discourse scenario, or in a distribution companies, or in the power industry at large, we actually pay about 1/3 of what should actually be paid. That's what the history has been. We actually pay 1/3 of what the tariff should actually be. So the business is suffering. I won't continue to spend my money. I'm talking about this is 10 years, 11 years into privatization. There's no way any distribution company or any business would want to continue to spend their own money in making the business stay afloat. And like Jumoke said, a lot of it is subsidized by the federal government, but the federal government does not pay that subsidy to the disco until a couple of years after. We're talking about 5 years, 6 years in some scenarios. So it's not like we get it immediately. We still feel that pinch. So I asked that question, which suffering do you want to pick? Do you want to continue with the underperformance? Do you want the inefficiencies? Do you want the archaic technology? Do you want people to keep coming to your house to bang on your door to check your meters? Or do you want it the way it's done in the UK and in the US, where you sit in your house and they can read your consumption remotely? They can see what you're doing with your meter. If you touch it, they can know. Do we want to move to that level? To do that, it comes at a cost to the business. So, and the truth about it is that the power, the lack of power has a major impact on our economy today. Let's not deceive ourselves. If the power, if it was stable 24 hours, your business would thrive better. My business would thrive better. The overall cost of living would come down. The cost of doing business would come down considerably. So the question again is, which suffering do we want to?
Wala, I've actually never heard it framed like that. Like somebody saying to me, you have to pick your suffering. Like, and I'm okay, so I have to pick to suffer, like pick your suffering. And I know that Tosin will have something to say about that, but I'd like I see the body language, but I'd like to pull in Dahlia from Cairo, just to say something about, I don't know, Dahlia, what you think about picking your suffering, but whether you could say something about the relationship between picking the suffering and the commitments we've made in terms of this low carbon journey that the whole world, including Nigeria, has committed to. What's your take? Initial thoughts, please.
Yes, I just want to add to the argument about subsidies and cost-reflective tariffs that, like, based on statistics in many countries, including Nigeria, that actually most of the subsidies for electricity goes to people who can afford it, to the rich people. Like 60% in Nigeria of the electricity subsidies goes to the rich. So in terms of suffering, actually these subsidies, if they are directed to food or other basic needs for the most needy, we would help alleviate really the suffering of who needed the most, rather than like giving free lunch to rich people who can afford actually paying the services. So this is also part of the argument and the difficult decision for any government to take, gradually remove subsidies and move into a more cost-reflective tariff structure. In terms of like how it contributes to climate change commitments, I would like to say that actually we can achieve a balance between getting a good quality electricity service, not compromising getting our businesses done and growing the economy, and still being more efficient and living with using less. Like whoever went over a diet, for example, you would to lose weight, for example, you get surprised by how much little food you can survive and still continue. So you realize that you're wasting actually or overeating more than you need. Similarly to electricity, maybe we're wasting across the value chain. I'm not pointing at consumers only, but across the value chain, starting from power supply, transmission and distribution. For sure, there are many inefficiencies that we can reduce. And actually, this would not just provide extra electricity to consumers who are not getting it or are not getting enough of it, but we improve the quality of life and quality of services for everyone. Is in a win-win situation. So if we go to the statement of the International Energy Agency, it sets energy efficiency as the first energy government should target for the low carbon transition or the clean energy transition. It's the cheapest, it's the most effective, impactful in terms of reducing the climate change emissions. But at the same time, you need some sort of support for consumers to take this direction. Though the aim of governments for increasing electricity tariff is mainly cost recovery, so they can improve the service, expand the supply and reliability and so on. But on the side, it actually helps to drive consumers to go to be more efficient, whether by conserving energy, shutting off rooms where they don't need the light during this time, or switching to using equipment on off-peak times, for example. So it is a big driver for energy efficiency. Electricity prices increase.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. And thank you for reminding us that we need to lose weight. I mean, you have a group of women on the call, and then you talk about eating less and losing, and we're all having guilty looks on our faces. So thank you for reminding. I mean, I like that analogy. Energy efficiency and losing weight. So stop eating all these snacks and things that they place all over the office. So, Tosin, pick your suffering. Can you respond to that, please? After deciding to lose weight. So
yeah, thank you, ladies. I'm glad you went back to the pick your suffering, because I have one or two things to say about that. Now, I hear you, the business leaders from the electricity sector. I totally hear you because as a business owner myself, it actually doesn't make much sense to keep investing and investing and then you're not seeing any returns, right? But I think from a consumer perspective, again, we need to go back and also look at the consumers that you're serving and what their own pain is. And unfortunately, to be honest with you, many of us do not know the nitty-gritty of your sector. All we just wake up to is you just want to wake up, turn on your light, and there's light, right? Until you're forced to, like someone like me, that I had to like wake up and smell the coffee, and I was forced to start asking questions. So now I know a bit, and I know what to do to manage the resources from that end. But when you say pick your suffering, it brings me to 2 points. Which one are we choosing? Is it affordability or accessibility? Because to me, there are two different issues here right now. So I'm looking at it from a perspective, I feel like I can pay regardless of the tariffs, even though I was saying we need to be careful about. So I'm saying it because I know it impacts every aspect of our lives. It will trickle down. So let me give you a quick example. I have staff here. I employ like roughly 15 people. Do you know that when the petrol pump price went up, at some point we had to shut down our offices because they claimed they couldn't come to work unless I increase their salaries. And I'm like, how can I increase salaries when we don't have the mandates that reflects or allows us to increase salaries? So that wasn't going to happen. So I was happy to sort of like give flexible work days and make them work from home on some days. Now, imagine if that was also an electricity tariff problem. Then that would be a business problem because in this instance, I would even want to keep the office closed so we're not consuming as much electricity or diesel. So the problem is two-pronged. Is it about the affordability alone or even having access to the electricity? So when you say pick your suffering, me, I'm even battling with which one to pick now in those two, affordability or accessibility. I would say just give us light. Because I know what we suffer here, how much we spend here just to stay open as an office.
Yeah. I'd like to go back to Wala and Jumoke at this point, because there was a statement Wala made about, paying more means we're able to balance, or it enables the providers to balance quality the way we have in other parts of the world. And that now brings me back to, so the service-based tariffs, for example, when that kicked in, or when they were doing the publicity around it, we were told it was supposed to, improve access, just improve things within the space, within the market, both for the consumer and for the utilities. I'm wondering, have the benefits of that begun to kick in? And if not, are we being a bit impatient with that policy process? Has it made a difference at all in the broader scheme of things? This is for Wala and Jumoke. Who wants to go first? Wala?
I'm okay with going first.
Okay.
I personally think that the service-based tariffs have made a huge difference, because when you think about it, it means you are really paying for what you've consumed, more or less. If you're in a band A, for instance, you get 20 hours or more, then the tariff is different, right? And there's a certain amount of hours in which the disco can be out for. They can be out for more than 4 hours in a band A scenario. And it gives the customers, the consumers, a good feel, knowing that what number of hours they're getting is what they're going to be paying for. So yes, definitely for the service-based tariffs. Prior to that time, there was really no clear-cut way of measuring the discos or tracking it or monitoring how the discos supply and price. So it was a welcome development generally. I'm not sure any disco had a problem with it. However, the issue now comes or arises where there's an interruption from the generation side, or there's an interruption from TCN side that is totally out of the control of the distribution company. So when you have those interruptions, of course, the distribution company that is only there to distribute supply is unable to meet the service levels. And the question then arises as to how the liability is apportioned. Quite all right, that TCN is penalized, the GENCOs are disrupted for lack of gas, technical issues. TCN also has issues, and that affects the DISCO, whose main and only job is to distribute power to the consumers. And in scenarios like that, it impacts on the service levels to the consumers. The way the regulator has looked at resolving this issue is giving out penalties. So if TCN is found to be liable, then they are penalized. If the GENCO is found to be liable, they are penalized, DISCO. But this is already an illiquid industry. You keep penalizing them. That's not eventually the right solution. As such, I think the main solution to it is to improve efficiencies across all touch points in the value chain. So if the generation company is as efficient, we have our gas pipelines not vandalized, we have our generation companies working continuously, TCN the same thing, the infrastructure is at prime stage, and then we also are able to receive the power and distribute it, then the service level or service-based tariffs can be more acceptable, more useful, if I may put it that way. So let me just end with that. That's the summary of what I was saying. Yeah.
Okay. So there's so many players along the value chain, right? And it seems like a lot of things need to be going right at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Jumoke, what's your take?
So for me, the SBT, I would say it's generally positive because it provided a framework for assessment. Before, there was no framework for assessment, really. Okay. And each distribution company had this database of customers that they were supposed to supply, power to. But what we have now is we have about 5 bands, those that must have a minimum of 20 hours, minimum of 16 hours, minimum of 12 hours, minimum of 8 hours. And previously, there was a minimum of 4. In the recent MITO order that came out, they have collapsed that minimum of 4 hours and asked that they should be upgraded and you should provide a minimum of 8 hours, to the customers that were previously in Band E. So there is an incentive, to encourage the distribution companies to perform, to provide more service. And there is a procedure for where you provide more service to your customers, you can request for an upgrade, an upward migration of those customers from a lower tariff band to a higher tariff band. Mm-hmm. So there has been, that incentive on the part of the regulator that has also brought accountability, to the distribution companies to ensure that they perform and supply customers. And there's a clear understanding on both sides of what is my entitlement as a customer. So I live in this area, I am on this feeder. What is my entitlement? And I think clarity in terms of the expectations also makes for a better relationship between the customers and the utility. So it's generally positive. But the issue is, how do you assess who is not responsible, who is responsible for non-performance? So that's the key issue. So who is responsible? Is it the DISCO? Is it the GENCO? Is it the transmission company? So there's what is called the grid accountability framework that is supposed to be a measure where the market operator computes penalties, what is called attribution, for who was responsible for the service failure. Was it the GENCO? Then the GENCO pays. Was it the DISCO? Was it the transmission company? But that process is not totally transparent because there is no end-to-end metering. There is no end-to-end metering. So for that kind of system to be able to work perfectly and equitably, then there needs to be end-to-end metering across the NESI, value chain. So that is one. There is also, on the customer side, for a customer that does not receive the quantum of power expected, there is a regulation, issued by NERC that refers to compensation, insists that compensation must be made to customers for them not having up to 90%. Once they fall below 90% of the minimum hours of supply that they should have had, then the DISCO is required to compensate.
Is that working though?
So it was initiated in May. It was issued and was supposed to take effect in May. And the Commission has been requesting returns, for distribution companies to submit monthly returns by the 15th of each month on customers that they need to refund. However, the issue of whose fault is it now kicks in. I can say that, Well, truly, these people had less than, for example, a band A, they had less than 20 hours. However, it was not my fault. It was actually the fault of the GENCO or the fault of TCN. So, as I said, there needs to be a lot of transparency, end-to-end metering for you to truly be able to adjudicate fairly on who is responsible to pay compensation. Yes.
Interesting. One of the reasons I was probing a bit on this is because of the work that UKNIAF has done around supporting NERC to set up this dashboard that tracks SBT delivery, right? So NERC has real time, the discos enter their data and NERC is monitoring that, and with a view to saying, okay, just what you're saying, customers need to be compensated if you've not provided as many hours as you should within the context of the SBT. Tosin has a very suspicious look on her face, and she's actually squinting her eyes. So I want to know what that look is about.
I was honestly just trying to hear Jumoke, but there's something she said that at least caught my attention. This, maybe you want to shed more light so I understand it better. Are you saying that the service-based tariff is an incentive for people that want to make sure that they have access to electricity? Is that what you're saying? Because I wasn't sure if I heard that right.
Okay, let me clarify. So
Yes.
you know that under the service-based tariff, you have customers in different categories. Those that should receive 20 hours, those that they should receive 16, 12, and it goes down in that direction. So the incentive is for a distribution company to, for example, those who receive 12 hours supply, to improve their supply to 16 hours. So where they improve supply to 16 hours, they're able to ask the commission over a period of 2 weeks, established over a period of 2 weeks. They're able to apply to the commission that I want to upwardly migrate these class of customers who were previously receiving 12 hours. I'm now able to give them 16 hours, and I've established that I can provide data, and I want to begin to charge them at the tariff for those receiving 16 hours. So that is the incentive, because different customers, based on the hours of supply that they receive, are paying different tariffs. The regulator is incentivizing the distribution companies by saying, provide better supply to these customers and be able to charge them more. Is that clear, Tosin?
Very, very clear. So my question now is, how do we sort of take advantage of such? Because to be honest, especially where we are, there's almost no light. When I come into my office in the morning, once the security says good morning, the first thing I say to him is there light?
or maybe let there be light. Switch the generating set on.
It's not even a wish. It's just a question. Is there light? So I know if we're doing an 8-hour day or 5-hour day.
So I think the first thing to start with is to check what is your tariff band? What feeder? What are you on? Are you on a band A or band B or band C? So if you check that,
how does she check that?
Your utility will be able to confirm, what band you are on. So once you can establish that, I'm on a 12 band, then you start to monitor. Do I actually receive 12 hours of supply per day, averagely? So if you don't, then you need to engage with your utility in order to say, I'm on this tariff band, I'm not receiving the hours of supply. That can come in the form of a customer complaint, engaging with the customer care unit, and also even with their technical people to ascertain what is needed in order to upgrade we customers on this feeder to a feeder that is receiving more hours of supply and regularly too.
Can I just interrupt you, Jumoke? Sorry, not to be rude, but just connecting to what she's saying, because when you started, Tosin, you did speak a bit about how you engaged and how you reached out and how you got results.
That was postpaid though, Stella. I was referring to the issues we had with postpaid.
I hear you. Okay. I'm alluding to the principle of it. A lot of customers in Nigeria don't actually, some want to, they don't even know how to go about like asking these questions, who to ask, who to complain to. So sometimes we talk at ourselves and we complain about these things. So when Jumoke is saying engage and you're saying you did it, I don't know whether it's possible maybe for those listening for us to unpick that a little bit. how did that sort of a process, how does it work? How can an average customer do something about the type of problem that you were talking about? So what were the steps? Could you break that down for us? And then maybe Jumoke, maybe you'd let us know, like from a disco perspective, what kind of structures are in place for the ordinary customer to engage? Yes, Tosin.
Okay. So I think for me, because of the kind of access I had to some people that work within the system, I would not say that's the typical way to engage, because I just kind of like reached out to people I knew. They told me what to do. I wrote some letters. I made phone calls, and we started getting responses. As a matter of fact, I was just checking as Jamaica was talking. I was just checking my phone to see one of the people I spoke to at the time. Now, I would say that's probably not the typical way for the everyday listener on this podcast. If EcoDisco or the other discos would put something like a consumer series in place that actually educates people on what to do, it will help. I mean, if I was going to talk about my business a little, that's what we do for clients that have this sort of consumer type issues that need engagement. And I'm sure as big corporates, I'm sure they all have something in place. There needs to be forums, there needs to be customer session. We need to know, like, honestly, because I don't think people know. And that's actually what creates the grouse. Because many things you said here now, I've actually learned quite a bit. I'm taking notes. I'm going to discuss with the admin people as well. And I'm actually going to follow up on this band that you just spoke about. Never heard about it. Do you see? And I'm coming from a learned perspective. Talk less of people that are not even educated enough. Of course, they will sit back in their houses and just talk and talk and talk. So the education series, especially in various languages, because look at how we are in Nigeria. Maybe 70% of the country only operates in their mother tongue. So you don't want to speak at them and be speaking in English that they don't understand. You want to break it down into various and just take it to the market. I think the market definitely needs a thing like that, if you ask me.
I completely agree. So how did you deal with how do you deal with customer engagement? Jumoke, how did that go at
So what happens is there's actually a customer protection regulation that came out in 2023, and it's available on the NERC website. That's www.nerc.gov.ng.
So I'm a market woman who doesn't know how to use www.
So wait, I'll get there. So this is because of those I'm talking to here.
Right.
Just so that at least you can have a document in your hands that you can use as a reference point. So what the structure that exists is that every distribution company has what is called a customer care unit. So these are the front-facing staff of the utility. When you go in, so their service centers, their business districts, essentially offices of the distribution company, whichever one is closest to you. When you walk in there, there is usually a customer care officer who you lay a complaint with and say, this is my challenge. I need help. I need assistance, in this area. Document it, get your letter acknowledged, and, hold on to it. Now, the regulation says that within 15 days, the unit must respond to you. Now, if they do not respond or they respond, but it is not to your satisfaction, there's an escalation procedure to what is called the forum offices. So whilst the first line of complaint is the customer care unit, which is manned by disco operatives, but if you don't get a resolution to your satisfaction, then there is a forum office. There are forum offices all over, in different parts of the country. And so what you need to do is to escalate your complaint that I have complained on this issue. It has not been resolved. I got a response. It was not to my satisfaction. I did not get a response. And the forum offices is manned by a panel of independent, professionals, including the regulator appoints a secretary, to keep. So it's a very serious, proceeding. And if what happens usually at the forum is the forum also sends that complaint back to the distribution company and says, you need to resolve this, and they give time. If it's not resolved within the time frame, the forum schedules a hearing. It's an administrative hearing between the distribution company's representative and the customer.
Sorry, who is the forum?
It's an office. It's called the forum office.
So where is this forum office?
They are located, it's set up by the regulator.
NERC.
And NERC, and it's located in different parts of the country.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Can it be digitized, Jumoke? Can it be digitized?
You know what you're saying, Tosin? Fantastic. Obviously, from what you've said, this consumer series, education series is key. And I know the regulator does do some form. The distribution companies also do some form, but obviously there's a need to do more.
Absolutely.
And you've also mentioned something that is very critical in this day and age. Does it have to be manual? Can it not be virtual? Can it be easier for the consumers, generally? And absolutely, why not?
Yep.
The regulator is usually open, to these types of ideas. So
I think the easier should be in cap locks, actually.
Let me just end the resolution process. So if there will be a decision at the forum, a ruling will be given, whether in favor of the distribution company or in favor of the customer. And once a decision is given in favor of the customer, or even there is a time frame within which that decision must be complied with. It's usually stated in the ruling, and the ruling is made available to the disco and to the customer. If the customer or disco is not satisfied, if any of them is not satisfied with that decision, then you have the opportunity to escalate to the regulator direct. So there's the appeal process. That is what is called an appeal process to the regulator. And then finally, if somebody is still not satisfied after these whole processes, then you can go to litigation. But there is an established process. Even the Electricity Act now says you need to go through these processes before you take a matter to litigation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from me. This is for both Bola and for everyone, I guess. So what you've said, Jumoke, is extremely useful. I saw Tosin nodding and taking notes. But again, I'm going back to what I said. Assuming I'm a market seller, I sell my ogbono and palm oil in the market. I don't understand a word of what you said. How do I engage? Or do we need to break it down further? That's not on you, right? Do you think we need to break it down in that way so that even those types of customers are able to engage? So if someone who, somebody very ordinary, because our experience, right, is that people are actually willing to pay for this electricity if they get it. So it's not so much so when we say pick the suffering, they're like, just give us light, we'll pay, right? So for those types of people, the person who has a small micro or meso business, the shoemaker by the street, who's making daily earnings and the business is reliant on past supply to do his cobbling, how does he engage? He can't afford litigation, or she can't afford litigation, but she wants to complain to someone about what she thinks is wrong with the way the process is working out. If we don't have a simplified way to reach them, do we need to begin to talk about that and advocate for that? That's my question. What do you think, Wala?
So I think, we need to advocate for that. Let me put that out there, because we have a very remote and very illiterate group that have access to power and need to have a way of communicating. But there's a part that Jumoke elaborates on, and maybe because she was just telling you through the process. At the customer care, at the disco level, we have emails you can send, we have phone calls you can make, we have call centers all over. We have call center numbers that when you call, we have call center officials there 24/7. We have Twitter, we have Instagram, we pick complaints from all these platforms, all of them, even LinkedIn. So if you go on Twitter and you tweet at a complaint, there's someone who's in charge of picking that complaint and working on it. So in terms of trying to get as close as possible to, what can, reaching the remote illiterate group, the discos definitely try their very best. And of course, these offices, I know Tosi talked about digitizing it, but these offices are currently physical. So they can actually, if you can't read, you can write. You can actually just get the address of one of these customer care offices and just go there. ECO currently has, I'm sure, about 21 or 22 customer care offices across our network. So we're as close as possible to our consumers. And you can always go to any of these offices physically. We actually have all these platforms available, and there's changes and amendments we've made since privatization to just make sure we're as close as possible to all of us.
Okay. But we all agree there's room for improvement. It's good
absolutely.
to share this information and put out what's there. I'd like to circle back, and thank you, Julie. I'm not giving you a hard time, am I? Because she's right here in the room with me. I have to be careful about how I give her a hard time. I'd like to circle back to Dahlia for a minute. I can't get this weight loss analogy out of my head, and I'm just wondering whether there are examples you're aware of where this link, where the type of link you were making worked, right? Where there was a direct relationship between electricity pricing, increasing a tariff, and energy efficiency. Do you happen to have, from your many years of experience working across countries, any experience where this weight loss journey worked very well?
Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples, some outside Africa and some from Africa also. So the first example I'll give is China. China had a really chronic electricity situation before the 1985. And then 1985, they took several measures, including increase of electricity tariffs. Just to give you an idea, the increase between 1985 till 2004 was almost 4.5 times, which is double the inflation rate that was there. And it helped actually the increase in price tariff for China to move into from electricity shortage in 1985 to electricity excess in 1996. But it was also always in conjunction with the energy conservation and energy efficiency policies. And the main driver, similar to many countries, is because the tariff is increasing, I need to reduce my bill. So let me look for measures that I can do to reduce my bill, whether I replace the lighting with more efficient ones, I use more energy efficient appliances, and so on. Two examples from Africa, I would give South Africa and Egypt. So South Africa also had a big energy crisis in beginning January 2008, and it is also one of the most greenhouse gas intensive countries in Africa. It's the top because of the extractive industries and use of coal in the power generation and so on. But they have a very interesting case study because they tied the government tied the increase in electricity tariff with that utilities and distribution companies have to implement energy efficiency and demand side management plans and create achievements for them to approve additional electricity tariff increases. So this balanced a bit with the consumer that there is no, I'm reducing my consumption and reducing my bill. Then I get to have an additional increase, but there is support going in parallel. And this integrated also an energy efficiency fund to finance, because this is one of the barriers is financing also the energy efficiency equipment, because it's usually more expensive.
Which country was this that did the fund? South Africa?
South Africa. Yes, South Africa. So, and they recovered the investment that they did from the bill that they're collecting from consumers. Similarly, also in Mexico, they have a very successful story where they began their energy efficiency program in the 1990s, targeting the residential sector, mainly appliances, lighting replacement programs, and so on. And they had a system of giving rebates or discounts, partial refunds to consumers for the energy efficient appliances. And they managed to achieve 30% reduction in the electricity growth from the 1990s till now, which is really significant. So
that's a huge weight loss story, man.
Exactly. So we don't need to compromise our quality of life. Like energy efficiency doesn't request you to compromise your quality of life, but it actually could help the whole system to work better. So it is more affordable for the consumer and it's more sustainable for the generators, the discos, and the whole value chain.
That's very helpful, Dahlia. Conscious of time, I'll just go around the room and get just very final thoughts from everyone so that we can release you to go back to your very busy days. Okay, so we started this. Tosin had a very serious look on her face. Now she's smiling. So that, I mean, it looks like you've picked your suffering already. Where did we land, Tosin?
I haven't picked my suffering. Where we have landed is that at least I'm more informed. I'm more informed about the pains of the energy suppliers. So I like the fact that they've come in to sort of like explain and expatiate on what the troubles are in that industry. But my final thoughts would still be, there needs to be a balance between the investors, balance between the government policy. And we, from a consumer angle, we just need land. We can't be a country that's supplying electricity to neighboring countries and we ourselves are in darkness.
Absolutely.
What's the way forward? There needs to be a way forward. And my last thought would just be, regardless of affordability, I know we started with should the tariffs be increased or not, but regardless of that, we just need accessibility to electricity. That would save lives. Thank you.
Agreed, completely. Walla, last thoughts?
It's nice to hear a customer, a well experienced customer, if I may put it that. And I'm glad that she's picked a few things. I'm hoping other people listening to the podcast will pick a few things. And that's one of the reasons why we do things like this. We are happy to speak at such sessions just to help people understand what it is that are the pains or our pains, and to help them know that we're working to get things better. We're not where we should be, but we know that with time, with some patience, with some forbearance, we will definitely get to where we ought to be. And we just need to get the support from the government, from the regulators, and of course the consumers, as the case may be. So yes, thank you very much.
Agreed. Thank you, Walla. Yes, Jumoke. Any famous last words?
Very famous. Okay, so I agree with Tosin, where she says there needs to be a balance. But in arriving at that balance, it's important that the electricity sector needs to be whole. So that is a key consideration. How can you make the electricity sector whole in a way that it's able to function as a catalyst for the economic development of the nation? That is critical. And, apart from that, what interventions could the government make that would have an impact on the tariff? Because the tariff is made up of various components, various costs. Tosi mentioned policy. A lot of the equipment, 90% of the equipment used in the power sector is imported. So that places a demand on foreign exchange. Can the government intervene in the areas of duty, the duty that is being paid for those equipment? The issue of gas prices is a recurring conversation. How can you manage the gas prices? Or can you manage the macroeconomic indices so that there's not such a huge, fluctuation and escalation of prices from one month to another? So yes, I would say balance. But in arriving at balance, all the key indices must be taken into consideration in order to arrive at a sector that is whole and that can deliver appropriately to, Nigerians. Thank you.
I mean, I take the point about the whole of the sector approach. We may not get everything right, but at least we need the different parts to at least be trying to work, right? That's really important. Dahlia, last word on this podcast.
Yes, my last word is that cost-reflective electricity tariff, from darkness to basic human right of having electricity in every home, especially in a continent like Africa, where only 40% almost of the people are electrified. But for this to happen and to reduce the social impact of increase of these tariffs, it has to be combined with a package of several policies to support this. And one of the essential policies that has to go hand in hand is energy efficiency, renewables, and so on, which would do lots of cost cutting for the consumers and the whole electricity value chain. And I also would like to end that usually times of crises are also a big time for big opportunities and innovations. So hopefully in a couple of years, we would hear in Nigeria like a success story similar to the countries that we talk today, that's unique, that's tailored for Nigeria and the Nigerian people. And I would like just to end with an optimistic message on that.
Thank you so much, Dalia. Gosh, that's a beautiful way to sign off. There's hope. And you have everyone on the podcast smiling. So you must have said something very, very right. Thank you, ladies, for being a part of today's session. You've made fantastic contributions, very helpful. It won't end here. We will be doing some further work and we'll be in touch with you about this. But just to say to our listening audience, thank you so much. And as we power down today's discussion, we hope you've been energized by the insights from the Women on the Grid. And don't let this conversation stop here. Share this episode with your network and help us illuminate the path to a brighter power sector in Nigeria and the type of reality that Dalia rounded off with. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Bye.